This Painting Lab paint mixing video is designed to accompany challenge number 2, our copy of this portrait by Theodore Rossell. So in terms of the paints that I'm using, it couldn't really be simpler for this painting. Cadmium red, cadmium yellow, French ultramarine, burnt umber and titanium white. So I'm going to move one colour at a time, and I'm going to mix on this palette here. And you'll see how much of this is guesswork and the fact that I'm moving my palette knife back and forth to compare all the time, which is really the only way of doing it. Okay, so we pick a colour to begin with, shall we? Why don't we pick this middle brown, which I think was the middle brown in the hair. Well, I'm going to start with a yellow base, I think, because I want there to be some warmth in this. I could start from a white base, but that would mean that our colour was quite desaturated. Wow, this red I'm using is really powerful. Depending on the brand of oil paint that you use, you'll see that some colours overpower others, and this red from Michael Harding is incredibly strong. But with that orange mixed, all I needed to do was put in a little bit of burnt umber. Wow, actually we're pretty close. Now that was really chancy. I didn't expect things to come together that quickly, and then actually you can see when I compare the colours, we're a bit too dark. So we're going to have more yellow, I think. Quite a bit more yellow. All these colour mixes are going to be achieved through a kind of informed guess, and I'm going to share with you how I'm making those informed guesses, but then really just taking a chance, not mixing too much paint at any one time, and then measuring back and forth. That's a bit better, isn't it? But let's just have a little more yellow in the mix, literally. So I mix my colours back and forth, and I probably want to gather up my paint mix and apply it all back to the palette again, mixing it around, trying not to expand this area of mix too much. Ah, that's nice. Excellent, we're off to the races. So let's get a bit of that on the brush, and you can see when I apply it over the top of the colour mix chart that it is almost exactly the same. So with that first colour mixed, we are going to scrape it all up. We'll put it right there. Okay. Now I could wipe all of this back, but as we're continuing to mix the brown, and I've learned a bit about that first brown mix from adjusting it back and forth, I'm going to add some burnt umber to what's already on the palette, and we'll see where that takes us. I'm hoping it's going to mix, well of course it's going to mix with what's already on the palette, and that all of this together is going to give us what we need for the darkest dark. It's not far off, just a tad lighter I think, and a little bit more red. Now I can't really explain to you why I decided more yellow, more red, other than that when I compared the colours directly, it seemed to want to be just a little more orange, and that is just about what we need. I think that's close enough, and then we can just put that there. And now we've got to bump this up for the highest hair colour. So let's do that again, not with white but with yellow. This paint mix, we want to keep the chroma high, the colour saturation. So just a tiny little skim of this red from the palette, because it does seem to be so strong. Yeah, and now perhaps you can see more than I was with my first paint mix. I'm really getting a sense of just how gradually I need to mix in this red because it's so powerful. Alright, we're still not quite there. We need quite a bit more yellow, so I'm going to apply some to the palette and take a good amount of this. To give you an idea of scale, each of these blobs is probably double the amount that you may put on your toothbrush in the morning. And although for painting of the size that I'm working at for this, so that's about what, 10 by 8 inches, these sorts of quantities of paint will be fine with the very thin, almost dry brush paint application that you'll see me using in the corresponding challenge video. Just a bit more yellow in there. If I'd gone with my gut and mixed up on this palette what I thought was right, without checking physically back and forth, my paint mix would have been way out. In my studio practice, I like to think of paint mixing as a separate challenge to painting. Lots of assumptions can be made if we're rushing it. And so putting an afternoon to one side just to mix paints really pays dividends. And yeah, just a tad too dark. Can you see that? I hope so. So even more yellow goes in. And this is why it really does pay to mix up tiny amounts. If we'd begun with, you know, a good couple of dollops of paint, by this point we would be in a real mess. But because we're mixing such small amounts of paint, we have avoided that problem. And yeah, that is just about what we want. And apply it there. I'm just going to clean all of this back now with a bit of rag soaked in white spirit. Alright, let's now think about the skin tones. Well, one of them is pretty up close to white. So let's mix from white. And what do we need? This is going to require the smallest smidgen of cadmium yellow, I think. Wow. Well, just with pure guesswork, that's actually not far off, I think. Yeah, a little bit too light. Can you see that? Perhaps that's not showing up on the camera, but just a little scrape of red. And you'll see, wow, oh my goodness, you see how powerful that red is. Too much. No matter, these mistakes happen. And I think it's really important to show you that I make mistakes too. So I'm going to chuck in a little yellow, again just a tiny tiddly amount, and you can see that the yellow doesn't have anywhere near the force of that red. Two different brands of oil paint, actually not something I'd recommend, but it happens. And if you give yourself enough time with paint mixing. Okay, let's see where that gets us. Well, that's closer to this one, so why don't we just head for that instead? I'm wary of this red now, maybe that's too much. Okay, the tiniest little bit. Let's just check that. Ramp that up one more tiny smidgen. You can see how I'm gradually creeping toward the colour that we need. And that, I think, is about there. Yeah, absolutely perfect. But not achieved through a perfect process, achieved through a lot of trial and error. Okay, so I'm going to put that safe and sound over on the other side of the picture, I think. So I'm just going to put in some white and pick up all of the paint that's already on the surface and just see where that gets us. And let me just turn the brightness down on this one. That's a bit better for you. And oh wow, yeah, that is just about where we need it to be. A happy accident after, as I said, a good deal of trial and error with the other colour mixes. But you will notice every time you mix paints that toward the end of your mixing process, you'll become more and more accustomed to what different mixes need. Yeah, that's just where we need it to be. So let's scoop that up and put it just there. Okay, I'm going to put all the red that was remaining on the palette, actually a tiny little blob, I would say, what, a quarter of a pea-sized blob there. And I'm going to just take a little corner off the burnt umber and just play and see where that gets us. Okay, that looks a lovely bright lipstick red, doesn't it? But let's see how it corresponds here. Well, we're not too far off. I think my mix needs to be very slightly more orange. So let's take up some yellow. Knowing that the yellow is very much weaker, the pigment loading in the paint is much less than the red. We can be sure that we're gradually going to nudge this colour up by adding the yellow, rather than surprising ourselves and ending up in a mess. Okay, as I look at this, I'm seeing that it actually probably needs to become more pale. We need to strip some of that vivid lipstick red out here. So to do that, I'm going to use just a bit of titanium white. I hope on the camera you're able to see the difference that this makes, but it just kind of mists the paint up a little bit. And just a little more orange in there. That's looking better, I think. We won't know until we compare. So let's do that. Yeah, so there's a little bit of something muddy about this colour that I hadn't seen before I started colour mixing. The process of doing all this has made me realise that I probably need just a tiny touch of French ultramarine. First time I've used it in this colour mix, isn't it? It might even be completely superfluous to these colours. You could probably get close enough without it, but to get that little bit of muddiness in this colour, I think that's what we need. Now, maybe you've seen other painting tutors on YouTube with colour mixing tutorials who will tell you, and I certainly agree with them, it is part of colour theory that you will mix a darker colour and strip heat out by adding a blue, like a French ultramarine here. You will mix a colour down, darken a colour, and keep warmth with something like a burnt umber. So I'm choosing to use French ultramarine here, and tiny amounts of it, to gradually creep down to a darker version of our colour mix and just desaturate and cool this colour down just a tad. And that, I think, is what we need. Let's try with the brush. Yeah, great. So we'll gather this up and we're going to put it right there. Now all we need to do is mix up for the lighter versions of the red. So to do that, take a good amount of this yellow and push it straight in to the colour that's already on the palette. It's really not necessary, if you're tactical, if you think cleverly about it, to keep cleaning your palette off if you're mixing the same family of colours. This row, this row, this row, we're all more or less mixed up without re-cleaning the palette. Okay, so we're in the right tonal range there. Do you see this orange is more or less in the same tonal range as the swatch we're trying to mix for, but it's just not the right colour. So I push back in with the red. Again, just tiny little amounts to adjust. Still too orange. Let's put in, oh, that's way too much red. Let's push in the red there. I say that's too much red. I may not have known that instinctively at the beginning of this video. And again, I think what we need to do is desaturate this colour. That's a guess, but I'll do that and lighten it slightly with the titanium white. And that looks a bit closer to the sort of salmon pink that we're trying to achieve. Yeah, we're getting close. We need Just a bit more desaturation, I think. Okay, tonally we're bang on. We just need a little more red. And perhaps now you see how by gradually creeping toward our colour mixes, it really is possible to mix any colour you like. And that looks just right. Get it gathered up and reapplied to the palette right there. And all we've got left, apart from the grey here, is the highest colour for the tunic. Let's just chuck in a load of the orange. This really is a sort of peach pink colour. And to desaturate, I think, you know, because that's too orange, but actually not by much. Yep, right tone, wrong colour. Much better that we creep toward the right colour than that we put in giant amounts and cause problems for ourselves, end up mixing massive amount of paint and then having to throw it away. And I think that is pretty much what we need. Let's check with a brush. Just a tad too dark. So just bringing that colour down a little bit in intensity. Get a nice clean brush, although it doesn't look clean, and just try that colour mix. Perfect. And we'll just pop that there. Now all we need to do is mix up this final colour, which seems as if it should belong in our monochrome black and white version of this source image, which you can also find in our challenge pack corresponding to the challenge video. But in fact, this is the colour that I used in the young man's eyes, so it's important to mix that up too, I think. That's not white, is it? It used to be, but it's not anymore. I'll take a bit from the big palette on the side here. This is a grey blue, so I'm going to mix in the burnt umber. As I usually say, we'll see where that gets us. Actually, that's not too far off, is it? And that's better. But I don't want you to think that because I'm a practice painter this is a perfect start to finish, you know, straight line of a process. It's not. It's just trial and error always. Colour mixing is always a process of familiarization. So that's all the colours mixed and ready for my Theodore Rossel portrait. If you'd like to check that out, you'll be able to watch me make a copy of this lovely picture from start to finish in a totally new way, using the Comparator Mirror, of course. Don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel. If you haven't already, you can like and subscribe. You can leave me a comment, hit that notification bell, you know, the normal stuff that people say. But most importantly of all, because this is an experiment to see if we can invent a new way that everyone can learn to draw and paint with confidence. If you want to become part of the experiment, you can go to paintinglab.com and sign up to our mailing list. And if you want to get your hands on a free comparator mirror, the little device that I and over 1,000 of you are using now to unlock the mysteries of realistic drawing and painting, you can get your hands on one of those for free by emailing us at this address. Many thanks for watching. I hope this paint mix tutorial has helped you, and I'll be back very soon with some more content a little bit like this. See you next time.